The Collapse video series is for entertainment purposes only. Do not commit acts of violence. One year after the collapse, globally, 2 billion people have died from starvation, armed conflict, and disease, most of them in the Indian subcontinent and Africa. In the United States and Canada, 80% of the total population has died or fled. 90% of the urban and suburban population and 50% of the rural population. Some of the U.S. population fled to Mexico, and some Canadians fled to the United States. Both countries were 80% urban and suburban before the collapse. They are now primarily rural. There remain just 60 million people in the U.S. and 6 million in Canada. Early crops are ready for harvest. Turnips, Swiss chard, broccoli, cucumbers, overwintered carrots, snow peas, and more. The harvest is not bountiful due to the seed shortage. It will be a lean year. More will starve. The vegetables are good, but there is not quite enough protein. Wild game has been overhunted. Lakes and rivers are overfished. Farm animals were slaughtered for their meat. It will take a few years for these populations to build their numbers again. People are catching rats and mice to supplement their diets. As long as they are handled carefully and cooked thoroughly, it is safe to eat rodents. The U.S. government, which does still exist, has succeeded in rebuilding dozens of new transformers. Building large transformers to suit a substation often takes 2 years, but the work on these was pushed along as fast as it possibly could be and was assisted by the government of Europe. The military carefully guards the transformers as they are transported along highways to their destinations. In many places, stalled cars have to be moved out of the way. Progress is slow going. The transformers reach their destinations and are installed. Power plants are fired up with skeleton crews of the few remaining people with the skills to do it. In the United States and Canada, the lights come back on. Survivors across North America are stunned to have electricity again. There was no way to get the word out in advance that this was going to happen, so everyone is taken by surprise. After a year in the dark, suddenly the power is on. The people are elated. They think the collapse is over and everything will be fine now. After a few days, or sometimes weeks, the towns get the water pumps running again. The people can use their washers and dryers instead of washing the clothes by hand. The carpet will finally be vacuumed for the first time in a year. Food goes in the refrigerator where it can be kept much better than in the basement, especially as the days are getting warmer. People can access the electronic photos of their children on cell phones and computers. In the first news broadcast since the collapse, the president speaks. Most of the people who voted for this president were in the cities, and they're gone now. Only a tiny fraction of the survivors had voted for this woman. She says, "We will rebuild the country together." She says, "While the country has experienced tremendous human loss, the military has largely been spared, as they were able to gather enough food immediately after grid down." She says, "We need them now more than ever, but they have run out of food." They will be sent throughout the country to help rebuild, organize work projects, and maintain order. She says everyone should welcome them into the communities and provide them with the food and supplies they need. The initial euphoria of having the lights back on is quickly crushed by the thought of the military contingents passing through towns to commandeer all of the supplies they have left and what little food they have managed to produce. Guarding against small groups of marauders was hard enough. How will they stand up to the military? Even if a town somehow warded off a unit of a few hundred soldiers, the military would only send more to quash the rebellion. Liaison activities between towns begin discussing ways to conceal provisions, send spies to work for the government, and engage in asymmetric warfare. In Europe, the Protector has instituted price controls to stop inflation. The result is that the portions of the population who create and sell products and services have less money than the people who work for the government. The government prints money to pay its employees however much they want, but the private sector can't increase income because of price controls. Civil servants and their families are able to buy more, leaving the private sector with less. This makes the private sector bitter. They are no longer working as hard as they did before, knowing the fruits of their labor will go mostly to the government. The quality and quantity of their products and services decline. The Protector sends a delegation to the United States and Canada to assist in the rebuilding efforts and provide advice as needed. They offer to buy oil and natural gas and other raw materials in exchange for manufactured items. They are especially interested in getting agriculture up and running again as soon as possible, offering machinery, seed production scientists, farm workers, and whatever else is needed. The governments of the United States and Canada are thrilled to accept this assistance and accept gifts of many of the creature comforts they have missed. Things in Russia have been going remarkably well. Following sanctions on Russia during the Obama administration, Russia had become much better at growing enough food to feed itself. The acquisition of Ukraine's abundant farmland solidified Russia's food security. The country also produces more than enough of its own oil. People in Russia are currently living better than anyone else in the world. Putin wants to take full advantage of this opportunity. Since the collapse began, he has conquered Ukraine and the Baltic states and annexed Belarus. He decides to invade Poland. The Protector and his advisors have been anticipating this. They hadn't made a move earlier as they needed Russian natural gas due to the loss of supply from the United States. And they needed Russia to supply Brazil with fertilizers to grow food. Brazilian soil is actually quite poor and would not be feeding Europe without Russian fertilizer. Putin has had the Protector by the balls for a year. The Protector and his advisors are emboldened by the restoration of the electric power grid in the United States and Canada and their relationship with the governments there. They can get natural gas shipments started before winter and hopefully a new supply of food from North America before the current harvest from Brazil runs out. Some of the advisors think the Protector is being overly optimistic about how quickly U.S. and Canadian agriculture can be up and running on a large scale. They wonder if the soil in North America might be more depleted and more in need of fertilizer than the Protector thinks, but out of fear they keep their mouths shut. The Protector sends military aid to the Polish army while he ramps up production of military equipment. China starts running out of its stockpiles of food. Historical tensions between North and South increase. Rumors float around in the South that the government is distributing more rations in the North, where the capital is located and Xi Jinping is from. The Southerners see that the government has been unable to stop the rebellions in Xinjiang and Tibet. They realize the government is weaker than it used to be, or at least weaker than they thought it was. The distribution of much-needed rations by federal officials has been guaranteeing the cooperation of the people. As those rations dwindle, so does the cooperation. Plague is now throughout Africa, going all the way from the Bab el Mandeb to the Cape of Good Hope. Any food coming from the Australian breadbasket to Europe has to either pass by plague areas or sail the other way around the world. Some choose to sail the other way around the world through the Panama Canal instead of the Suez Canal, but that adds over 2,000 miles, increasing the length of the journey by 10 days. The extra time and fuel cut into profits, so inevitably some ships choose to sail into plague territory. Since they've been at sea for weeks, they have to refuel and resupply. They assure themselves that they will be extremely careful, and for the most part they are. But eventually, in the exchanges with locals that are necessary for refueling and resupplying, someone gets too close to a local in the early stages of pneumonic plague. The sailor gets back in the ship bound for Rome. If you would like to see an ad-free version of these videos, go to my BitChute or Brighteon page. Even with the ads, there is not nearly enough revenue to support continued production of the series. Please consider supporting me on Subscribestar or click on the PayPal link in the description.